Welcome to Glenfield Presbyterian Church's 50th anniversary celebrations. We trust that you enjoy this chronological presentation of the first 50 years of the life of the church in Glenfield. Our history actually began on the 1st of February 1932, when Mr. Arthur Newman gave 3/4 of an acre of land for a church to be sited in Glenfield. 11 years later, on the 4th of October 1943, Presbytery gave permission for the land to be sold as paying the rates had become increasingly difficult. 14 years after the sale of the section, on the 1st of April 1957, Mr. Ohms donated a section for a church on the corner of Wairau and Hogan Roads. Services were held on the first and third Sundays of every month in the then interdenominational church built on land belonging to the Methodist Church. At the request of the Methodist Church, services were discontinued just 4 months later on the 14th of August 1957. Prior to 1961, Presbyterians in Glenfield were under the care of St. George's Church in Takapuna and St. Andrew's Church in Birkenhead. On May the 14th, 1961, Session were informed and approved of a move to unite Glenfield and Forest Hill into one parish. In July 1961, Auckland Presbytery set up a new parish on the North Shore, known as Glenfield Forest Hill. A property on the corner of Forest Hill and Seine Roads was purchased, and a 30-foot by 30-foot hall was built, overseen by St. George's and St. Andrew's churches. Pictured to the left is the original St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church building in Birkenhead. Mr. Alec Black, a lay preacher, school teacher and parishioner at Glenfield Forest Hill Presbyterian Church, began a Sunday school in his garage. The church hall was officially opened on May the 26th, 1962. Forest Hill parish life was established, and in January 1963, the Reverend Rex Lang was called and inducted to the combined Glenfield Forest Hill parish. Pictured here is Reverend Lang and his family on the steps of the Forest Hill manse. This is where Glenfield Presbyterian Church's history really begins. In 1963, land was purchased in Glenfield on the corner of Chartwell Avenue and Chivalry Road, the current location, enough for a church hall and a manse. Before the church was built, the land was used by the Education Department. 3 fabricated classrooms were placed there while a new school classroom block was being built. They were also used for Sunday school. Our first service was held in March 1963 in the Glenfield Primary School, just next door, with the Reverend Rex Lang officiating. After worshipping there for 9 months in the Glenfield Primary School, the last service held there was on the 10th of November 1963. Don Stewart was our first Sunday school superintendent, followed by Ian Stevenson. Both gentlemen are remembered with affection for their contribution at that early time. And so it began. In 1963, the existing site was surveyed, and pictured here is Bernie Finlay getting things lined up before the building begins. Each weekend, regular working bees were held, mainly consisting of session and Board of Managers members. There are a couple of people in this photo that we can't identify. Can you help with this mystery? Affectionately known as the Onion Shed, Glenfield Presbyterian Church started to take shape. The church was officially opened in November 1963, and the manse next door was built a year later. In 1965, Reverend Arch Davey was inducted and ordained as the Associate Minister, working alongside Reverend Rex Lang. Pictured on the left is Reverend Arch Davey and his wife Olive, and the image on the right is of the Davey family at their daughter Chrissy's wedding. These shots were taken on the day of Reverend Arch Davey's ordination, and the people waiting for the Reverend Bill Best are being patient while they wait for the moderator of the Presbyterian Church to arrive. In 1967, the 14th North Shore Girls Brigade began their parades at the church. This group continues successfully at the church to this very day. 2 years later, the Boys Brigade team section was established, with Reverend Arch Daisy presiding as chaplain. In 1969, the parish was divided into two separate churches, with Reverend Lang heading the Forest Hill Church and Reverend Davey leading Glenfield. This picture shows the first session of Glenfield Presbyterian Church on Sunday, May the 25th, 1969. And pictured here are the session, stated at the front of the congregation. And here they all seated around the communion table in the unfinished church auditorium. The first president of the APW, Mrs. Helen Rimmer. And this photo depicts Helen Rimmer meeting with the first board of managers in the yet unfinished building. The billboard pictured here features Tithing Month, a month of giving which greatly blessed the parish, both financially and spiritually. In 1968, we took on the pastoral care of the Albany Presbyterian Church. The church was demolished by a tornado on the 21st of April 1991. All that remained intact was the small organ and 2 or 3 pews which were stolen in the hours after the tornado struck. A temporary building was moved to the site until a complete rebuild was completed in 2001. By 1970, the Glenfield Church Hall was too small, and so extensions were planned and soon began. In 1970, every Saturday for 10 months, working bees were held. The men did the building and the women provided all the morning and afternoon teas. Here's a photo of Graham Hullum building the foundations for the extension in 1970. Here we see the foundations of the classrooms taking shape. A crane was employed for the harder tasks, such as lifting structural beams and the roof. Pictured here is Ken Stout up the ladder. GPC was starting to take shape. The building of the classrooms also began. Ross Callahan is on the right-hand corner of the wall frame. Another Saturday working bee, and the exterior frame and the roof are nearing completion. And here we see Bernie Finlay, again working hard on the inside of the church. Here's Bernie Finlay again, and Trevor Small fixing the bell on the roof. Unfortunately, some years later, the bell was stolen. Another Saturday, another classroom. The kitchen and nearly complete extension, now our storeroom, toilets and creche. The toilet block and classrooms were finally completed in October 1976. Land was purchased in Glendhu Road, and in a huge act of faith we looked to build another manse. Pictured here is the building of the second manse in Glendhu Road in Glenfield. To celebrate, the session held a dinner at the new manse in Glendhu Road. In 1973, the Reverend Peter Armstrong was called. He was ordained as the Assistant Minister on the 5th of April 1973. Albany District was growing and the church was continuing to expand. Pictured here are Reverend Peter Armstrong and his wife Mary. The manse at Glendhu Road was finished just prior to Christmas, and a newly married Peter and Mary Armstrong moved in. It was officially opened in February 1975. Here we see Peter Robinson, Peter Armstrong and Peter Beer, commonly known as the Three Peters, together with the Reverend Arch Davey. Here's an extract from the 1974 Crusade Week. The Ambassadors for Christ came, led by Arthur Hill and Eric Black. The outreach was a great success. Pictured here are some of those who took part. An important date in the church calendar were the harvest festivals. where the congregation brought all types of food to share with the community. In January 1975, Reverend Arch Davey accepted a call to Wairau Parish in Blenheim. On February the 3rd, 1976, Reverend Ian Galloway was inducted. Pictured here are the Galloway family. From the left, Kathy, Susan, Ian, John, Marie, and of course in the front row, our very own Kerry, now Kerry Irwin. Reverend Ian Galloway served the church for 13 years, until the 31st of May 1989. Reverend Galloway was followed by the Reverend Andrew Norton, who served from the 26th of July 1990 to the 1st of July 1996. Andrew is currently the minister at St Columba in Botany. Featured here are Andrew and Sue Norton and their 3 children, Phoebe, Elliot and Angela. Here's a trio of ministers in the form of Andrew Norton, Ian Galloway and Peter Armstrong. After Andrew Norton's ministry, the Reverend Wilson Orange served from late December 1996 until December 2003. Wilson is currently the minister at Morrinsville Presbyterian Church. Pictured here is Wilson and his family celebrating a family wedding. From 2004 to 2005, the Reverend Margaret Wilkinson looked after the parish. And then, in 2006, Reverend Emma Curran, her husband Mark, and their daughters Gracie, Annie, and Esther arrived.
Bless the Lord, come bless the